Hello and welcome to Politics Today, and in this week's programme we'll be discussing the Wilberforce Academy and how they are equipping and preparing the next generation of Christian leaders. And in this programme today I am joined by Ben John, who's a Wilberforce Academy Development Officer, and also Rebecca Moffat, who's the Communications Officer for Christian Concern. So guys, welcome back to Politics Today, and it's great to have you back on the programme.
Thank you for having us back.
Thank you for having us, yeah.
Pleasure. Ben, I'll start off with you. Wilberforce Academy is a programme set up by Christian Concern, who you both work for, to equip and empower young Christians and preparing them for leadership roles in future, whether that's business, whether that's government, whether that's finance, or whether that's media or politics. How important is the Wilberforce Academy to help prepare the next generation of Christian leaders?
Well, I think the Wilberforce Academy is really a vital initiative and probably the most important work that Christian Concern does, in the sense of being proactive in raising up the next generation of Christian leaders in public life. The messaging in the world today, in schools and sadly in many churches, is one that is contra-biblical and which tries to separate our faith from society, to separate our faith from things that we do, whether it be business, education, healthcare, politics, law, any of these different areas of the arts. The world is trying to say that our faith has no role there. And what the Wilberforce Academy is really doing is equipping young Christians, the future leaders in these different spheres, to realise that actually we're called to glorify God wherever we are and to bring all things under His lordship through cultural engagement, through faithful witness and through evangelism.
And Rebecca, I mean, it's a great name, the Wilberforce Academy, clearly inspired by William Wilberforce, who, through his role as a Member of Parliament, was able to abolish the slave trade. How important is it, do you think, to actually build on a legacy of William Wilberforce himself and use him as an example to meet some of the challenges facing young Christians today in the workplace, particularly professional Christians?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, obviously, William Wilberforce himself was a great bringer of change, but he has his own sort of backstory of how he got there as well. The reason we've taken his name is because of that change that he brought. Ending slavery was a big thing. And actually, if you look at it, it didn't really take that long in the grand scheme of things for that change to come about. There was a change that needed to happen in his own heart as well before that could happen. So we've taken his name. Yes, he has a legacy. We love what he's done. That's sort of the reason we've taken it. And we're going, okay, what's wrong with our culture? There are lots of different areas. Slavery maybe isn't what we're focusing on. We're focusing on different issues, like abortion is right up there. All of these cultural issues that Ben was talking about, Islam, other controversial issues, shall we say, and saying, okay, but where can we put God in that? Just like Wilberforce did with ending slavery, how can we bring God into these things? How can we change that and bring a nation to its knees, basically, which is what Wilberforce did, and we want that same legacy. So that's why we've named it after him.
Absolutely.
I think one of the big turning points in William Wilberforce's life, and Rebecca alluded to it in the sense of in his heart, was he really wrestled with this question of to serve God, does he need to become a church leader? Does he need to become a priest? And the reality was actually you can serve God where you are. He was serving God, glorifying God, worshipping God by and through his campaigning work in Parliament. And I think that's one of the messages we're really trying to drive home with our Wilberforce Academy delegates, is to say that if you truly want to serve God, you don't need to quit your job and go and become a pastor. You can serve God and make a difference and work to build his kingdom where you are, in bringing it under the lordship of Christ. And another thing about William Wilberforce Academy as well is the community as well. One of the, I think, key strengths of the Wilberforce Academy are the connections that you make. We had over 80 delegates come and join us at the Wilberforce Academy, and the friendships that are formed is the most powerful thing almost with the Wilberforce Academy. I attended myself in 2016, and some of my best friends are people that I met at the Wilberforce Academy. We've strengthened and encouraged, prayed for one another, encouraged one another. That's been such a blessing in the battles that we're currently facing on these kinds of variety of issues. And that's really modelled after William Wilberforce, who had the Clapham sect, who had people like Hannah More, Thomas Clarkson, who were maybe aren't as famous in history, who were with him, supporting him, working alongside in their own spheres and encouraging one another in what they were doing.
And what's really encouraging about the Wilberforce Academy as well is that all of these delegates are coming from their different areas. So it's not just people who are interested in politics, it's not just people who are interested in law. We've got medics out there, we do have the church people, we've got people from all spheres of life that we're saying, look, you can bring Jesus to your sphere, you can change culture for Christ where you're at. You don't have to be, as Ben was saying, in that church context. You don't have to necessarily be that missionary going out to the far places. Actually, there's stuff to do here, right where you are, and you can take Jesus back there.
Absolutely. Could you want to break down what the Wilberforce Academy is? I mean, my understanding of it's a week of incredibly intense kind of training and teaching, and probably testing, no doubt, as well. And I've got two presenters to thank for the Wilberforce Academy. In Norma, I used to do a program with called Five Alive back in 2010, 2011, that kind of era, and also Reagan King as well, that our viewers love very much, who's come out of the Wilberforce Academy. So I've done quite well out of it myself, so much appreciated. But can you just break down the kind of week's course, as it were, to train, equip these young Christians to be able to stand in today's world, particularly your generation, that you've grown up in a post-Christian society, which is something that my generation and generations older still had elements of before. It's so much harder now than it was 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I guess the first thing I'd want to say is that the Wilberforce Academy is not just restricted to 1 week. It's an ongoing community where we have continued events and teaching on a variety of different issues as well, where we continue to encourage and fellowship and support one another. So during the 1 week residential, our messaging to the delegates, what we say to them is really that this isn't just this isn't just another 1 week conference. This is really just the start of a journey and welcoming in these delegates as to become part of a movement that we're doing. But the 1 week residential itself, it is the core of the program, where we teach and worship together and come alongside one another. So the teaching over the course of the week is carefully structured to firstly look on Christian understanding of culture. What is the Christian's task? What is the church's task in society? How should we be engaging the culture? And then looking back through history to see what are the areas where the church, where Christians have been making a difference in the culture. There's a big trend at the moment to sort of have a revisionist history about how awful Christendom was. And of course, we know that we're still sinners, that we still make mistakes, and so there are fallen aspects to it. But actually, under Christendom, where Christians were making huge progress when it came to issues like women's rights or science and healthcare, all of which was driven by a love for God and a love for neighbour within a robust Christian worldview. Particularly, for example, with science, it was the knowledge, the presuppositions that we have in the Christian worldview which drove us to look at science as an act of worship towards God. And so we see that inheritance, we see that legacy that we have now, but then we see that today things are very different. And we've lost that as we've gotten rid of the roots of our Christian heritage, we're now beginning to see the loss of the fruit, and that we've been borrowing from the Christian worldview in our society today. And that can only last so long. It's a train running without tracks. At some point it's going to fall over and collapse. And I think that's now what we're beginning to see in our society. And so with that, we then go deep into the key issues facing Christians today, regarding issues of ethics and medical ethics, abortion, euthanasia, issues relating to interfaith dialogue, issues relating to identity and marriage, some of those kinds of issues. We really equip and support the young people, the delegates, to speak and engage on those different issues. One of the key aspects of the week as well is the application groups. So this is where the delegates are split into their sectors each day so that they can be thinking about, praying about and discussing how this applies to them in their sphere and what it is that they're going to do. One of the key things we always say to them is, what are you going to do differently? Write down one thing that you're actually going to do and how we as Christian Concern can be supporting you in that, because we don't, it's an amazing week. We don't want it to just be emotionalism of, 1 week with other Christians gets you really sort of gets you on a Christian high. It needs to lead to action. We need to do something. God's called us to go and do something, and we really want the Wilberforce Academy to be doing that. And so we, at the Christian Concern Beyond the Wilberforce Academy Week, seek to support and encourage people with whatever it is that God's laid on their heart, whether it's setting up a Christian school, whether it's doing pro-life campaigning, whatever it may be. We really want to be there alongside them, supporting these next generation of Christian leaders.
Excellent. So should we look at some of the highlights of 2019 Wilberforce Academy?
Wilberforce Academy 2019, the 10th Wilberforce Academy. So we are believing and hoping for changed people to change culture, changed and transformed by the love of Jesus Christ. Are you those people? Are you those people? And do you love him? Do you love Jesus? And it's going to be a great week.
Yeah, it's been fun, edifying, encouraging, and really informative, thinking about kind of the application of the Christian worldview to society, and just to think productively about how to be used for God's purposes.
Well, Wilberforce Academy has changed my life because my eyes have been opened to the truth, and I've been pursuing the truth my whole life. And now that I know the truth, I can't deny it. And I'm obligated to go out to share it with others.
The main reason why I came to Wilberforce Academy was to just find out a bit more of what it means to live for Jesus in public.
The day has been quite an action-packed day, but it's been really valuable. It's such a blessing to be around like-minded Christians with a common goal, also to learn and hear from speakers who are at the top of their game, who've done the research.
I didn't know what age people were going to be, what kind of people were going to be here, like how many people were going to be here, but it's been amazing. There's so many cool people doing all sorts of crazy different things, and yeah, all the lectures have been very relevant and very important.
There was a lot of worship and there was prayer. There was opportunity as people got to know each other as well, that they would pray with each other.
What I've really come away with is a bigger view of God, which is kind of crazy because I didn't think that the gospel impacted culture so much, but our God is the Lord of all things, and I think that's been really driven home to me.
I'm amazed by what I learned here, and also just the relationship I built with different people, and actually to equip me to go back to my country and to actually make an impact at my university, in my town, and eventually in my country.
Yeah, it's encouraged me just to see there's other Christians doing this, and they're not, I guess, big superstars as it were within the Christian faith, but someone like me.
The Wilberforce Academy for me has constructed to reconstruct a foundation in Christ which I can now go forth and implement into my everyday experience.
It's a safe space to be thinking about issues that culture just needs to engage with.
It is for people who have a passion for being effective in their walk with the Lord.
Everyone's super friendly.
Yeah.
It's honestly an atmosphere like none other.
Yeah, if you want to have a bigger view of the gospel, come here.
So that gives you great insight into the week that is the Wilberforce Academy. Rebecca, can you share your experience of attending one of the Wilberforce Academies, and did that lead you to work for Christian Concern?
Well, yes and no. So I've been at two now. I was at 2019, the video that you just saw, and I was at this one just gone. I actually started working for Christian Concern before I went to Wilberforce Academy, so that was actually really nice because it gave me, I just started and then went to Wilberforce, and it just gave me the basis of, oh wow, this is the work that we're doing. I think as you heard there, some of the delegates were saying, this is life-changing, and it really is. And Ben was sort of alluding to that before. I don't think I had ever, I speak sort of personally, but I think it's the same for most of the delegates. You never really study the breakdown of different topics. I remember, I think the abortion one was probably the most powerful one for me. We had spent a whole day looking at life issues. Beginning of life, I think was in the morning, and then end of life issues was in the afternoon. And it's just, it really hits you, because this isn't necessarily stuff that you're being taught in church. Maybe it should be, but equally we recognise that churches don't necessarily have all the resources to equip you. And I think that session in particular, I mean, there are lots of sessions. There's one on biblical law as well. I've never had a chance to look at that in depth in church, but suddenly to sort of see this biblical law, oh my goodness, yes, it applies to us now, and this is how Jesus speaks into life now, and this is how biblical law works in today's culture, and it does. And then being able to apply that to where you're at is just, it's so powerful. It does change your whole mindset. It changes your life, actually, because it gives you the tools to then go ahead and say, okay, I know this, what am I going to do with it? I'm going to do this now. I'm going to speak to my friends differently. I'm going to set up a new foundation. I'm going to, there's endless possibilities that you can do with it.
Excellent. And Ben, there's a bit of controversy surrounding this year's Wilberforce Academy at Worcester College. Can you share with us the opposition that your generation faces just for holding a week-long seminar that is the Wilberforce Academy on equipping Christians to stand in today's post-Christian world?
Yeah, so we had our 2021 Wilberforce Academy at the start of September at Worcester College, as you said, and we had an amazing time. We had over 80 delegates come and join us, many of whom described it as life-changing, as one of the best weeks of their lives, and we've been hugely encouraged and humbled, really, by the testimonies from that week. But testimonies not just from the delegates, but also from the college themselves. During the week, the college staff were overwhelmingly positive about us, saying how kind and friendly we were as a group. One of the cleaners was so amazed by just our presence that we brought with us that she asked one of the lecturers about what is it about you guys, and he shared with her the gospel and led her to the Lord.
Amazing.
And the conference staff there were saying how they'd love to have us back next week. Next year. Sadly, a few weeks later, some of the students at Worcester College discovered that we had been there at the start of September, so this is only a few weeks ago now, and complained to the college staff and to the provost, and complained about the fact that we had been there. And about some of the talks that had apparently happened. We were there outside of term time. None of the college students at the college weren't there. We were there. We were fairly private. We had our own sort of space for the academy, and yet the provost of the college apologised to the delegates, to the students of Worcester College, for hosting us, a Christian organisation, for the week. And as you said, it really shows the hostility that there is today for those who are Christians, who are not ashamed to be a Christian and not ashamed to speak out about the various issues and challenges that we now face in this post-Christian culture. And the hostility that we receive there, that just for having the academy, so not for anything that was explicitly said, none of the talks have been, it's just about what people think had been said. And the mere thought that we had been at the college a few weeks earlier is a threat to the well-being of the student body. And so I think it really does show the sort of the state of the nation that we're in, where, as Christians, we're seen as a threat just by our mere presence. Which is sad to see.
And Rebecca, what it's like to feel firsthand the kind of wrath of this new cancel culture that's emerging. We see on social media and it's there, and we see celebrities losing their jobs because of a particular viewpoint they advocate or certain question marks if they don't really support this extreme left-wing militant progressive agenda that is put forward that's essentially anti-biblical, anti-Christ spirit essentially. So what is it like to actually face that cancel culture head on with the work you do at Christian Concern, and also the threat that future Wilberforce Academy weeks could be in jeopardy?
Well, I think firstly we've got to recognise that there is that danger there. There is, I mean, I say danger, there is that opposition to us, and that is a reality. You know, we've got to expect that as Christians as well. Jesus warned us, the Bible warns us that it's not going to be an easy ride. Being a Christian isn't an easy ride, and we know that. And we know that from the work that we do as well. In fact, one of our recent cases that we've just taken on with the Christian Legal Centre is a nurse who she's lost her job, but simply for wearing a cross at work. So, you know, this opposition is real. It's real and it's out there. But I think weeks like this, and like the Wilberforce Academy, there are other academies out there as well, they're so important because actually, particularly for our generation, I think we're seeing people lose their faith. So to have something that's going to equip you and say, okay, no, the journey isn't easy. Being faithful isn't easy, but here are the tools that you need to keep going. I think that's so important, and that does allow us to face this opposition head on and keep fighting the good fight, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And Ben, how important is it not to give up? You're in a tougher generation than my generation, because you essentially grew up in a post-Christian society. Even when we went to school, we still had hymns, we still had Christian assembly. There was still an element of a Christian ethos at school, but we know now that that is completely gone, particularly for the generation coming up as well, who are finding it even more difficult than your generation. So how has the Wilberforce, and how does it enable young Christians to stand and make a difference in their generation? Because we know from Wilberforce himself, it only takes one man to make a difference, or one woman to make a difference, by standing up for Christ in this society that we're living in today.
Well, I think it's important to remember that despair and fear are sinful attitudes to have. That, yes, things, you know, we don't pretend that society is better than it is. We don't pretend that these things aren't happening. But the reality is that we are with, you know, Christ is for us. And if Christ be for us, who can be against us? And that in him we're more than conquerors, through him who gives us the victory. And so Christ has already won the victory. He won the victory, he is winning the victory, and he will have the final victory. And so I think we need to just really appreciate what God has done in history, and then know that as we serve God and that we need to be faithful, that we trust God for the results, that we trust God that he will preserve us and protect us, whatever that may look like. I think sometimes we can keep our eyes fixed on the world, and we end up being like Peter, looking around at the waves and sinking, when we're called to walk towards Christ, walking upon the waters and just stepping out in faith. And I think that's really what the Wilberforce Academy is about encouraging the delegates to step out in faith, and that don't use the world's metrics of success, don't use the world's metrics of favour, whatever that may be. It's to step out in faith and to serve Christ where we are. I think if we put too much pressure on ourselves and a burden on ourselves to fix all the problems in society, we are taking the same, we're making the same mistake as the world, who think that they need to right every single wrong and fix every single inequality through human means. We're called to be faithful, and that does mean working for justice, that does mean loving mercy, but it also means walking humbly with God, but realizing that it's Christ, the power is in Christ, it's not in ourselves. It's in his Holy Spirit as he works in and through us. And so as we step out in faith, we know that all wrongs will be righted at the end, all injustices will be encountered for, and so then we need to be faithful where God's placed us and to step out there.
Absolutely. And Rebecca, we've got 3 minutes left of the programme. So anyone watching this programme today that's been inspired by you two, and you're great role models for your generation, and if they want to get involved in the Wilberforce Academy, how can they do so?
Yes, look us up online, wilberforceacademy.org.uk. You can see the general schedule up there. You can see how to apply. Applications aren't quite open yet, but you can register your interest and it would be great to have you. Absolutely.
And also I got to mention my wife's nephew, Josh Price, who was in that video as well, that he's been influenced by the Wilberforce Academy, given that great support, and he's made a big difference in politics and where he is as well. So I know that my wife and family are very proud of him for what he's done and standing up in his generation. It's so important to have role models, isn't it, like yourselves, that people can look up to, that people can say, look, these are strong Christians living in today's society of your generation, going against that tidal wave of opposition that your generation faces in particular. And how can they draw upon that strength as well as having their own faith and their own strength in standing up against this tide of anti-God legislation, anti-Christ spirits, I think is the best description I can use it, that we're living in today?
Well, I think it's about being connected and being surrounded by other Christians who can support and encourage you with one another. Totally. It's important that we do have, the heroes of the faith. And so one of the things that we do at the Wilberforce Academy is we have clients in from the Christian Legal Centre who share their story of being persecuted, marginalised for their faith, whether that's being sacked for expressing something about marriage or getting arrested for preaching the gospel on the streets. Those are often really inspiring times for the delegates. I'd also add that being connected to Christian Concern and seeing the work that we're doing and standing forth, humbly and graciously, we're thankful to God that He has blessed our work. And in Philippians, Paul writes about how his chains are inspiring others to speak and to be bold. And so I think it's important that we hear about those stories that are going on now, and whether that is sort of getting connected to Christian Concern.
Ben and Rebecca, thank you so much for being my guests today on Politics Day, and thank you for the courageous work you both do and for standing up in your generation, doing a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank you all for watching this programme today. If you are a young Christian, you feel yourself isolated, then you don't have to be, because there are organisations like Christian Concern. They have put in place this remarkable week course called the Wilberforce Academy that you can be a part of, that you can be equipped. So why don't you join up and join the fight and use these two examples of how to live the Christian faith in a post-Christian world. So thank you for watching this edition of Politics Today.